Are you interested in a gardening method that allows you to create free, nutrient-rich soil that's extremely easy, allows you to grow plants with absolutely no digging whatsoever, and allows you to reuse a lot of the organic materials in your landscape? Well, this might be the answer. Hi, I'm GardenerScott. I'm a master gardener who discusses everything gardening so that you can become a better gardener. And today the topic is lasagna gardening. The concept behind lasagna gardening really isn't new. And even the name lasagna gardening goes back quite a ways. Most gardeners who are familiar with it learned from this 1998 book, Lasagna Gardening by Patricia Lanza. And the concept is this. In the garden, we take organic materials and we put them in layers, just like we would a lasagna. And the organic material ends up getting cooked and gives us soil where we could put our plants. So if you're not familiar with how lasagna is made, it's pretty simple. You take some tomato sauce and then you put some flat noodles on top of that, maybe some more sauce and some cheese and noodles and sauce and cheese. If you like meat in it, well then some of those layers are meat. If you don't eat meat, then some of those layers might be vegetables like eggplant. There are many, many different recipes to make a lasagna in your kitchen. Well, the same holds true in our garden. We just take organic materials based on what we have available and maybe what we want to use, and we layer it to make a lasagna garden bed. Materials like pine needles and wood chips and maybe some of the plants we pulled from our garden because they've bolted and they're starting to go to seed, and straw and grass and weeds. All of these materials can be placed in an area of our garden that eventually will give us soil as these ingredients break down. The breakdown of these materials, the decomposition, is the key to the whole process. What we're doing is composting. This is a process that's called sheet composting. Instead of putting all this stuff in a big pile like we would in a compost bin, we're doing the same thing with the same materials that we would make compost with, but instead we're spreading it out over the ground. The layers of these different materials will decompose, and that rich result is what we're putting our plants into. Just like when we make compost, the layers need to be composed of green ingredients and brown ingredients. The green ingredients are nitrogen rich, the brown ingredients are carbon rich. And so the green ingredients are things like the weeds that I've pulled. They're fresh, they're rich in nitrogen, this will be a layer. The brown material will be something like this, dried leaves and dried grass. We alternate the layers as much as we can between the greens and the browns, and that's how we make our lasagna. Building a lasagna garden bed is extremely easy. I think the hardest part is actually just getting all the material, because we want to try and start with as much volume as possible. So this is a bag of dried leaves and grass that I've been saving. The green stuff is fresh. The straw's been around for a while. And now that I have all of these different ingredients in pretty good quantity, I can think about putting my bed together. You don't have to do this all at once. You can stagger it over a period of time, but to really get your bed started, get the material decomposing, the more material the better. Like any garden bed, you want to place it where it gets an ample amount of sun. During the growing season, at least 6 hours, and more sun is better. So this is where I'm going to put the bed. It gets sun all day long. And I've taken some of these branches and logs to frame out a general area of where my bed is going to go. And you don't need to worry about pulling the weeds that are in this bed space or taking out any of these plants. Just go ahead and leave them all in place. Because the first layer of our lasagna is going to be cardboard. And the cardboard is a very effective barrier. It will do a pretty good job of killing the plants underneath. and will eventually decompose. You can also use multiple sheets of newspaper, at least 5 or 6 pages of newspaper stacked on top of each other. Now, I'm lucky to have a long box, but if you use multiple pieces of cardboard or the newspaper, make sure that the edges overlap so you don't inadvertently get some of the plants, some of the weeds underneath popping through. But it's simple. The cardboard is in place. Now I'm going to water this, wet it to help it stay in its current position. And then I'll start adding the other layers of the lasagna. The cardboard is basically a brown layer. So now I'm taking a lot of these weeds that I pulled and covering up the cardboard. So I have a green layer on top of the brown layer. And now I'll water this in. And now I do another brown layer. This is pine needles and really small wood chips. And I'm just working to cover up the green layer underneath. Now I'll take some of the fresh cut, I should say fresh mown plants from my landscape. And I have a green layer. I'm guessing you've got this figured out because this layer was the dried grass and the dried leaves. And now I'll go ahead and water it in again. The water really helps everything settle down and gets all the pieces touching and will start that decomposition process. Now, as I said before, getting the material may be the hardest part because you can see how easy this is. It's no dig. We put the cardboard on top of plants and all of this on top of the cardboard, extremely easy. But this bag of leaves, I actually got from my neighbor. I think that's a great way to help increase the volume. You don't have to come up with all the material yourself in your yard. Go ahead and ask your neighbors for some help. And I got this bag of freshly cut grass from my buddy Steve. Now, I don't have a lawn, so I really don't have the ability to cut my own fresh grass. Well, that's where Steve comes in. I just let him know I'm looking for some grass, and when he mows his lawn, I'm usually there to help him bag it up, and then I bring it home. And this grass is great to use throughout the garden, but especially as a layer of the lasagna. On top of the grass, I put a layer of straw. And then on top of the straw, I put some of the garden plants and some more of the grass. And then on top of that, I put some more dried leaves. Now, this is the recipe for this bed today. The recipe changes. You don't have to follow my recipe using my ingredients in this order. Go ahead and use the ingredients you have. As long as you alternate that brown and green, it really doesn't matter. Now, in the book, Lasagna Gardening, she suggests that you use peat moss and compost. I highly recommend the compost. I don't think the peat moss is necessary because you have to buy that. And she has a section where she talks about how you can buy the ingredients for a lasagna garden bed. But I think one of the best things about this is you can do this for free. If you don't have all the ingredients, ask your neighbor or take some time. I've got this starting to bake because all the layers are together. It will start decomposing soon, but I don't have to use this bed right away. And I can continue to add to it over a period of weeks, even a period of months, as I get more material. I like to add layers of garden soil as well. Not only does it help introduce some of the bacteria to all of these ingredients, but also a good quantity of minerals in addition to the basic compost nutrients. If you use soil and compost and or peat moss, you can plant in a pile like this right away. Now, there's going to be decomposition. The decomposition requires nitrogen. So if you're planning to use the pile shortly after you build it, I suggest adding fertilizer in some of these layers, particularly a high nitrogen fertilizer. But I like doing this in the summer or the fall, where I can build this bed, let it decompose, add more material, add more soil, and not worry about it. Over the winter and into the spring, this pile will break down. And next year, I can use it fully decomposed with all of the nutrients available. It's up to you whether you design your recipe to use soon or you design your recipe to use sometime in the future. And a lot of this is discussed in the book. As I said earlier, you want to try to develop as much volume as possible. The more ingredients you have, the bigger this bed mound is, the quicker it will decompose. If you don't have all the ingredients right away, you can gradually add to it over time. But try to get as much as possible. 18 to 24 inches of height is a good goal to start off your lasagna bed. Now, as it decomposes, it's going to settle. And you may have 18 or 24 inches to start, but by the time it's decomposed, it might only be 6 inches that you're actually planting into. And that's fine for most plants. Do realize that that settling should influence how you approach lasagna gardening. I recommend adding more organic material as it becomes available. And that's why I do it the year before I plan to use this bed, because I'll have more material as leaves fall and as I clean up the garden. I find that works a little bit easier. But this is all there is to it. You just have organic material and or some garden soil and some peat and some compost, and then eventually you've got a bed ready for planting that is loaded with nutrients. Go ahead and try lasagna gardening. This is one of those gardening methods that will really help you become a better gardener. And if you're serious about becoming a better gardener, well, then I suggest that you watch one of these GardenerScott videos to help you on your journey. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.